Good evening. You're watching Left, Right and Centre. I'm Nidhi Razdan. Fake news is a bad thing, but do we even know what it really means? Fake news in the Webster dictionary is defined as news reports that are intentionally false or misleading. But some world leaders and governments like our own often use the term if you do a story which is critical of them. In other words, they misuse the term. There's also a difference between incorrect news and fake news. Incorrect reports are not put out intentionally, they are mistakes and should be corrected with an apology if needed. So last night, when the Information and Broadcasting Minister Smriti Irani announced draconian guidelines to deal with fake news, there was a near unanimous outcry in the media because the rule said that based on a mere complaint, an accredited journalist would lose his or her accreditation right away until a probe was completed. Then the Prime Minister intervened this morning and ordered the ministry to withdraw the circular. Now, fake news is a very real problem. How exactly do we deal with it? That's the big debate on Left, Right and Centre tonight. But first, let's take a look at how the government first pushed for a draconian media gag and then reversed it hours later after the media pushed back.
Within 24 hours of Smriti Irani's order threatening the withdrawal of accreditation on allegations of fake news, Prime Minister Narendra Modi overturned it. In what is being seen as a major snub to the minister, the Prime Minister's office stepped in just 10 minutes after she tweeted this, welcoming positive suggestions to uphold ethical journalism, and then this press release, the Prime Minister directing Irani's press release on fake news be withdrawn. This, as Smriti Irani had since last night been on a Twitter offensive when journalists from NDTV, Srinivasan Jain and Akhilesh Sharma questioned this move. She tweeted back saying, the accreditation guidelines along with the code of conduct have been ascertained by the PCI and NBA for journalists working with or aligned to them. To Suhasini Haidar of The Hindu, she tweeted, the accreditation committee comprises of editors, journalists and reps of PCI and NBA. Do you think they will victimize one of their own? To Ahmed Patel of the Congress, glad to see you awake, Ahmed Patel ji. Whether a news article or broadcast is fake or not will be determined by PCI and NBA, both of whom I am sure you know are not controlled or operated by the government of India.
No decision can be taken by any minister, any ministry. No paper can be moved, no orders can be issued without the PMO.
Call it a snub or a deliberate attempt to sideline the Information and Broadcasting Minister, the Prime Minister made it clear that he wanted the new rules against fake news to be immediately withdrawn and didn't give an opportunity for the Information and Broadcasting Ministry to give any clarification.
The minister's proposal included changing accreditation rules, following which action would be taken on complaints against an accredited journalist. A journalist's accreditation could be suspended merely on the registration of a charge by either the Press Council of India or the News Broadcasters Association. The NBA, however, said they were unaware of any such proposal. If a journalist is held guilty, then she or he loses accreditation for 6 months for a first offence, 1 year for a second offence, and the accreditation is cancelled altogether for the third offence. It ended by saying that any accreditation request will depend on whether the journalist agrees to the code of ethics and conduct of regulatory agencies. Government accredited journalists are given easier access to ministers, government offices and official events.
Our idea is to have an open house.
At the Press Club in Delhi, a protest against the controversial Information and Broadcasting press release with top editors and journalists comparing this to attempts by Indira and Rajiv Gandhi to gag the press when they were prime ministers and pointing out the press must stand united against these attempts by any government. The Editors Guild called it a draconian measure and said it opened the door for frivolous complaints to harass journalists and organizations to fall in line. On many occasions, governments, parties in power at the centre and states are charged with propagating fake news themselves, and that it was an arbitrary order with the government arrogating for itself the role of policing the media.
I think we do need to take a legal recourse because in the past, in the absence of a legal recourse, the manner in which press bodies are now being filled in by government appointees is troubling.
आज तो आपने पत्रकारों की एकजुटता के कारण प्रधानमंत्री ने अपना फैसला वापस ले लिया, ठीक? लेकिन हमें मालूम नहीं कि कल वो किसी और रूप में आने वाला है.
However, this is just one aspect of press regulation. 2 weeks ago, the government drastically changed the nature of the accreditation committee of the PIB. It has been downsized from 22 to just 8 members. The new nominees are Prashant Mishra of Dainik Jagran, Navika Kumar of Times Now, Kanchan Gupta of ABP News, J. Gopi Krishna of The Pioneer and Smita Prakash of ANI.
Despite the withdrawal of the ministry's notification, journalists from across print and broadcast have gathered here not only to talk about the self-regulation against fake news, but also to talk about what was essentially a gag order of the government and to ensure that press freedom is preserved, whatever the government has to say. In New Delhi with Sunil Prabhu, this is Nimsha Jaswal for NDTV.
Well, this issue is far from over, even if the Prime Minister has intervened. Because while the PMO wants the Press Council of India to address all fake news issues, it turns out that the government changed the members of the council just a couple of weeks ago. And among those on it is BJP MP Pratap Simha, who was just last week busy defending a website known for peddling fake news called Postcard News. Its editor was arrested just days earlier.
Smriti Irani's controversial order rolled back. The Prime Minister's office said that all the fake news-related issues should be addressed by the Press Council of India. But the government reconstituted the Press Council, constituted by the government on 16th of March. Pratap Simha, the BJP MP from Mysore, is listed as a nominee of Lok Sabha Speaker. Simha was one of BJP MPs who last week defended Mahesh Hegde, the editor of Postcard News, arrested for falsely reporting the injuries of a Jain seer on an attack. In truth, the seer was injured in a road accident. Pratap Simha wasn't the only one. There were multiple BJP MPs and MLAs who tweeted in support of Mahesh Hegde. That included Anant Kumar Hegde, the Union Minister, and BJP Member of Parliament from Delhi, Mahesh Giri. The BJP's dalliance with fake news did not end there. 3 days ago, multiple ministers promoted a fake news checking website called The True Picture in what seemed cut and paste tweets. Among these bigwigs, the INB minister, Smriti Irani. But the Indian Express reported that The True Picture had attacked its stories, even though those stories were backed with documentary detail. The Express story also found that the phone number linked to the website was linked to Bluecraft Digital Foundation, the same site that hosted the PM's book for students, Exam Warriors. When we checked, the number that was linked to Bluecraft had already been changed to a mobile number. Now that number, when we put in Truecaller, the number identification app, it showed that it belonged to someone named Amit Malviya. Now when we called this particular number, this is what happened.
डायल किया गया नंबर सही नहीं है, कृपया नंबर की जांच कर कॉल बैक करें.
So the number does not exist. Now we tried asking Amit Malviya, the head of BJP IT cell, if the number was his, to which his response was that he doesn't know anything about the website and it surely was his phone number. We tried to ask all the ministers, including Smriti Irani, so as to why they preferred this fact-check website over the others. But by the time of going to air with this story, we got no responses. With Nimsha Jaswal and Srinivasan Jain in New Delhi, Manas Pratap Singh, NDTV.
And the Editors Guild in its statement has also said it's deeply disturbed at the government's selection of the Press Council of India, that it disallowed the Guild's nominees on technical grounds, that its reconstitution of the Central Press Accreditation Committee also raises questions over non-transparent processes followed by the INB Ministry. So much to talk about on the program this evening. We're joined here in the studio by the former editor of the Indian Express, Mr. Arun Shourie, who of course is known for his fearless writing during the emergency imposed by Indira Gandhi and subsequently as well. Arun Shourie, great to have you back on NDTV. And we began this conversation a little earlier in the evening and I'm going to continue from there. Do you really believe that the Prime Minister didn't know that this circular was being issued?
I'm repeating myself, but the fact of the matter is that in this government, as they say about God, not a leaf moves but by his will. And actually he claims credit for that. Everything good that happens is because of him. How could Smriti Irani or some bureaucrat in the INB ministry draft such a far-reaching circular, which will, every fool would have known that it will have far-reaching consequences? And you must see this as a pattern, as part of a pattern. Look at the way, the perverse way in which this government has used the sedition law to silence people, Hardik Patel, Kanhaiya Kumar and so on. Sedition. That is the overthrow of a lawfully constituted government of India, to break up India. This is therefore a part of that pattern. And secondly, we must remember, you say, okay, Smriti Irani did something and the Prime Minister would not have known. This fake website was supported, do you know by how many ministers? 13 ministers. Yeah. Mr. Modi knows everything about Manmohan Singh being with Pakistan, the previous Chief of Army Staff conspiring with Pakistan. He knows all that, but he does not know what 13 ministers are doing. How is it possible?
So why do it then? Why issue the circular?
No,
and then take it back. Was it a trial balloon you
of course,
to test to see the reaction?
That's right. And that is where the lesson is. Whenever they fly up such trial balloons, there should be such a tsunami of a backlash that they withdraw. It's very important to do that. This is the second or third time the government has attempted it. You see what they are doing to the right to information. So on all these matters, they are trying to choke the independent voices in the country because they are not now in control of the situation in India. Therefore, they will continue to persevere with such things. And this whole hoax, this entire whole hoax of autonomy. Oh, no, Press Council of India will do it. No, Broadcasting Association or something will do it. And they reconstitute them. In any case, just see what they are doing to other autonomous institutions. What is happening to the RBI?
No, that's true.
Or to the Election Commission. And just 1 second, to the Supreme Court. The second senior most judge of India, Justice Chalmeshwar, has been compelled to write a letter to the Chief Justice. Please call a meeting of all 30 judges so that we can discuss government interference in the judiciary. So Supreme Court is worried, and we should repose our faith in the reconstituted Press Council.
I want to come to that because it's interesting, and I think our viewers need to know this, that the Editors Guild statement which has come out this evening is actually the strongest statement of any of the media organizations, and it comes after the Prime Minister's intervention. And it makes this point that while they acknowledge the intervention of the PM's office to withdraw the INB Ministry's notification, they remain deeply disturbed that faith is reposed in the Press Council to deliver justice, because the recent reconstitution of the Press Council has been done in a way that gives rise to doubts over its independence and ability to pay neutral umpire. It says the Guild's nominees to the council were disallowed on technical grounds, and therefore they've said that there are non-transparent processes being followed. And now we've just seen a BJP MP is on the Press Council, who until a few days ago was strongly defending a fake news website.
Right, and no, even on this this website, which these 13 ministers of Mr. Modi's government supported, and said, please look at this, please look at this. They said they took pride in saying we have nailed 4 fake stories. As the Indian Express pointed out, 2 of the stories were stories published by the Indian Express. One story was based on a letter by the Cabinet Secretary himself.
And never denied by the government.
No, how can they deny it? It is the letter. Second is a story based on an FIR by the father of the poor boy who was killed
in Gujarat.
Because of riding a horse. He's a Dalit boy. So these were the 2 fake stories which this website has nailed. And 13 ministers of this government, Mr. Modi's government, who is now so outraged by Mrs. Irani's circular, they said, oh, look at this, look at this. And we think we are supposed to believe that he didn't know anything?
Tell me, Mr. Shourie, the problem today seems to be also in how we define what fake news is. I mean, I actually went to every dictionary today to pull it out, which is why I put that in the introduction. Fake news is that which is intentionally published or broadcast with the aim of misleading. It is done intentionally, whereas incorrect news is something that is different. The problem here seems to be that the government is now defining fake news the way Donald Trump does, which is anything you don't like or which is critical of you is fake news.
Right. So I think
there's a pattern there
your
too.
definition is completely correct, that it is falsehood which is spread deliberately. And you can see who is doing this more and more. If you just give me 1 minute, I'll give you examples which Alt News has put out on its website. You just go to the website and see. There's a photograph of chaps hammering at the statue of Rajiv Gandhi, and they say, because Lenin's statue in Tirupura was broken and people said, oh, this is not a good idea and so on. So they said, look here, these people didn't speak when the commies broke Rajiv Gandhi's statue. Photograph, everything put out. Actually, it turned out that this was a photograph of something happened in 2013, not in Tripura, but done by the supporters of United Andhra. Everybody knew it. The photograph was published in Deccan Chronicle. These people picked it up and said these are commies who are doing it. Similarly, several big people said that this JNU student, Najib, who was missing, has joined the ISIS. They put out tweets, see, these people were speaking for this JNU student, he has gone there. And it turned out that the actual Najib who has joined ISIS is from Kerala. That is fake news. Then there's another one, you can go to their website, they say Pakistani flags were shown at the demonstration on the 200th anniversary of that Bhima Koregaon battle. Not Pakistani flags. They were Islamic flags. Secondly, then in this terrible violence that occurred, that buses were being stoned in Gurgaon during the that Padmavati
Karni Sena.
Karni Sena thing. And what did their website say? They said, bus has been attacked by Nadeem, Firoz, Amir and Ashraf. 4 Muslim names. And the SP of the area, contacted by Alt News, said, no, there are no such persons.
Yeah.
We have not arrested anybody.
They put out a statement clarifying.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is fake news. We don't need complicated dictionaries to tell us what fake news is, and we just have to see and we know who is putting out this fake news.
What would you do as an editor, if you were an editor today, to deal with this problem of fake news?
I think first is I would absolutely adhere to the truth and fearless. You see, this itself shows, this circular shows that the government is very nervous about certain facts coming out. So what the media should do is to redouble its efforts, its energy to excavate those facts and broadcast them. Secondly, whenever they come across these news of fake news, don't just dismiss it as somebody's fringe effort. It is their mainstream effort. So publicize the truth about that fake news in this way. Third, if I may just promote something, that there are some very small groups which are actually now, they have made it their business to nail fake news people. And those persons, we should give them some time. Every day, just give them 2 minutes. What is the fake news that you found today? It will get to millions of viewers of yours. It will give give them a platform.
Because all they're actually doing is basic fact checking. But can I ask you, Mr. Shourie, what parallels, if any, do you draw between what's happening with the media today and 1975? Do you see a parallel at all?
Well, once again, as Mr. Advani said at that time, they were asked to bend and they chose to crawl. But I think that now the media is being kept in line, not so much by fear as by bribe, as by just stuffing their mouth with advertisements and so on. And the ingress of large houses, large business houses in owning equity in these channels and so on, and newspapers has meant that their tails can be pressed at many points. So the media today is much more subservient, when in fact if you step out of Delhi, the fear about Modi and his government is really now almost invisible. These youngsters who march, the farmers who marched to Bombay, the Maratha identity fellows who were there, no fear. These stand-up comedians who are always making fun. So,
but does it tell you something that when a circular like this comes out from the INB ministry, the media outcry was fairly widespread? Yes. And even in these times when the media, large parts of the media have become cheerleaders for the government, that there was a pushback. I mean, did that surprise you that there was that level of pushback and they had to take it back?
No, well, they should be. It's very good that at last the media is waking up, and also that is a symptom of the fact that the fear of Modi has gone. That even in Delhi, actually when the NDTV, these tax things and raids or something took place, again there was a very large meeting at the same venue. So one thing after another is sort of dissipating the fear of the Modi government. And therefore it's very necessary for the media, shed fear, report the truth, stick to the truth, and you will triumph. Because every government, please remember, Mrs. Gandhi's emergency taught us that lesson. Rajiv Gandhi's defamation bill taught us that lesson. Jagannath Mishra's Bihar press bill taught us that lesson. Every government which has raised a hand against the media has had that hand burnt and has had to withdraw that hand. Exactly what has happened now. So the media should stand firm. They should speak as the Editors Guild. It's wonderful that they have spoken clearly on this matter. And if we are together, government to aati jati rehti hai.
Let me ask you one final question, Mr. Shourie. The problem here is, look, a lot of people are concerned about what is perceived as fake news. A lot of it is spread on social media and online particularly. What is the best way to regulate that? Because you have bodies like the Press Council also, which really lack any teeth. There's nothing much that our own regulatory bodies can do beyond issuing a condemnation. So is it time to give these bodies more teeth, provided of course it's not a Press Council of India the way it's constituted now, but constituted fairly?
Not at all, because you see, these bodies in India will always be constituted by the government directly or indirectly. So the best thing is the reader has to be vigilant, the viewer has to be vigilant, and as I mentioned to you, I'd repeat that suggestion again, please give more time and give a platform to the persons who are pursuing this, who are nailing fake news and all. I'll give you this example. Do you know how many persons are doing this wonderful work on alt news? Every day they are able to nail a fake news. Do you know how many persons there are?
Just a handful of people, a couple of them, I think,
yes,
isn't it?
Just 3 paid employees, just 3. So just with 3 persons, what you can do. Imagine if you give them a platform, if other people gave them donations and said, yes, we want an independent media in India, how much more could be done? And that's the way to deal with fake news. On the other side, we should always stick to the truth. Then, and third, we should have confidence, because they may manage all headlines, they may put out all fake news, but people in the end will compare what they read in the newspapers or see on these channels with their own lives. You try and tell the farmer that, oh, wonderful things have been done for him, and the poor man is on the verge of committing suicide. You think he'll listen to you?
Propaganda can only work up to a point. Well, Mr. Shourie, it's great to talk to you on this particular issue. Thank you for coming in this evening. And I'm going to take this up with our panelists now this evening. Mr. N. Ram, joining us tonight, the former editor of the Hindu newspaper, and Jency Jacob, who's the managing editor of Boom Live, which, like Alt News, is a site that has done tremendous work in busting fake news every time it comes up. We have Jyoti Malhotra, the consulting editor of the Indian Express, the paper that really set off the storm today. Smita Prakash, the editor of ANI, joins us tonight as well via the OB. She's also on that press accreditation committee that had been reconstituted recently. Here in the studio with us is also Vaibhav Agarwal, who is a member of the BJP. And let me take this first to you, Jency, on everything that has happened today. You heard Mr. Shourie speaking here as well. What's your theory on this? Why do you think that this circular was put out in the first place? This is very important to understand. Do you really buy the theory that the Prime Minister didn't know and is very upset?
You know, Nidhi, I think we should be living in La La Land if we actually think that anyone would, buy that argument that Smriti Irani and the Prime Minister or the cabinet ministers themselves wouldn't have had a discussion before bringing out such far-reaching circular of so much of importance. Also, let's remember the first time that this government has ever talked about doing anything as far as fake news is concerned is about coming out with a regulation which gives out guidelines about how accredited journalists of mainstream media have to be regulated when it comes to fake news, as if that's all that fake news is all about. Yes, I do have my issues with mainstream media where I do feel very strongly that they've not done enough in addressing this problem, which is why we have the government even thinking of coming out with a circular like this. But having said that, can we actually, can the government really say that fake news is all about only that mainstream media is putting out? Just last week, and as you have also mentioned it on the show as well in that story, and also Mr. Arun Shourie also pointing that out, that throughout last week, BJP cabinet ministers were coming out in support of Mahesh Hegde, despite several times Mahesh Hegde and Postcard being called out by fact checkers like us in trying to push ahead a communal agenda. and you had ministers coming and tweeting it out in support, saying that, release Mahesh Hegde with a, the hashtag that was being trended. After all this, the government, the first serious action they take in this direction is all about regulating the mainstream media journalists. So, it's no surprise what they were trying to do here. I guess something else is going to come out, because Smriti Irani has also talked about digital media and whether there is a policy that is required on how digital media has to be regulated. So I guess this was a red herring, trying to also check out whether how journalists are going to react. Probably they did not expect a reaction like this, or probably this was all according to plan, that you come out with an order, the next day the Prime Minister comes out looking all good, getting this withdrawn as well. So that's what I think could have happened.
Well, all kinds of theories about what exactly happened, but let me go across to Smita Prakash, and because Smita, you're part of the newly constituted Press Accreditation Committee, and I just wanted to ask you about the Editors Guild's attack on the constitution of this committee that you're a part of, as well as the reconstitution of the Press Council of India. They've in fact questioned its independence and ability to play neutral umpire. Smita, how do you see this? You've been an experienced journalist for so long. Now organizations like the Press Council and this accreditation committee are coming under, huge fire and question marks being raised.
Look, I'm not anybody to answer as to why I got selected. That is something that you have to ask Ms. Irani, or you have to ask somebody from the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. I can only say that I have 29 years of experience in journalism. I'm the only woman only woman editor of a news agency for several years. In fact, there is no other woman news editor. So, maybe I've been chosen for that. I really don't know why I have been chosen. And now that I've been chosen, I don't expect that my role is going to be anything of a policeman, if that's what, one of the soundbites that you ran, saying that people with dubious credentials have been, why? Just because my father is not an information and broadcasting secretary, or father-in-law is information and broadcasting secretary? Is that the reason that the journalist concerned had to question my credentials of being in the Press Council? No, I mean, this is weird. As far as self-governing is concerned, we are all trying to govern ourselves. We do not want the government to come and tell us what is fake news and what is not fake news and lay down rules and regulations. That having been said, worldwide, every government now is very scared after Cambridge Analytica, and you know that EU is also thinking about it, America is thinking about it, but the last thing we want is policing by the government. Our freedoms have been won with great sacrifices. Mr. Shourie was out here. Many of us joined journalism because of what we saw Mr. Shourie do. But it really scares me that, at this stage, Mr. Shourie is just plugging a website. Fantastic. Alt News does great stuff. It's done stuff against my agency too. And despite that, I say that there is room for an Alt News. There's room for a Wire. There's room for a Scroll. But there is also room for other kind of news, which is not something that you may agree with. Partisan politics, partisan journalism exists, whether we believe it or not. And to discredit anybody else's journalism and say only one website does good journalism, or only one channel, or only one newspaper does good journalism, rest is all partisan, I'm sorry, we all try our best. As far as fake news is concerned, we have all been victims of fake news simply because television has become all about live broadcast, and in such a situation it is extremely difficult for us as editors to check it, because it goes live on television. It is a mold that might need to be broken.
No, just a quick follow-up question to that. I don't think the problem is with, let's say, news websites or newspapers that have a particular ideology. Of course, there are different organizations that exist with perhaps different ideological leanings. I think the problem is when something that is out and out fake, like postcard news, gets defended by BJP members of parliament, and I personally don't think arresting the owner of that website was the right thing to do. I feel that it sets a very dangerous precedent, and we have to find other ways to punish those who peddle fake news. But I think the problem is just with fake news, people who intentionally put out news with the intention to mislead, with the intention to create trouble.
I get that, but if somebody if he works as a journalist, whether in a website or mainstream media, and he's intentionally promoting hate crimes, if he's intentionally encouraging hate crimes or participating in it, then an arrest is warranted. I disagree that somebody, just because he's a journalist, should not be arrested. I'm sorry, whether he's accredited or not, if it is proved that he is encouraging hate crime, he needs to be put behind bars. And there has to be an inquiry whether he was guilty of that or not. That is not the job of the press council or the editorial board or anything like that. That's the job of the police. That's not my job if I'm sitting in the press council. That's not the job of the information and broadcasting ministry. That is law enforcement which has to do that.
Well, Mr. Ram, let me ask you, do you believe that this is the last we've heard of attempts to try and control the media or to somehow to gag the media, to use a stronger word? You think we're going to see more of this?
Yes, Nidhi, I heard your interview with conversation with Arun Shourie, my friend, and I fully agree with him that they should not be seen as an isolated instance. They're testing the waters. Of course, this was remarkably stupid. I read the guidelines carefully, and it starts by saying increasing instances of fake news in various mediums. I should correct their English, including print and electronic media. Now, the point is that the manufacturers of fake news are largely the trolls who support the Sangh Parivar, support the Modi government. There's no question about it. And now that, as Arun Shourie pointed out, that doesn't seem to be working. People are resisting. They're getting desperate. And so this is a ridiculous attempt to muzzle the press. And I fully agree that the reconstitution of the Press Council and the Central Press Accreditation Committee, they brought people who are close to the government. These are people, it's not a balanced composition at all. They've drastically altered the composition. And if I were, if I were in their shoes and I had any self-respect, I would resign immediately, not accept the patronage of this government. So it's outrageous that this attempt is being made, but we can't see it as an isolated case. I've known ANI for a long time.
You made a very strong comment there, Mr. Ram.
What is this? Is it the Khilafat movement?
No. So, Smita, what do you think about what Mr. Ram said? I mean, he's basically saying someone like you, not just you, but all of you who
Mr. Ram
should take a stand and resign.
Mr. Ram is my senior, and I feel very bad in doing this, but what do you expect me to do? Khilafat movement and say that I object and I go onto the streets and become a Kejriwal? What do you expect me to do? If I have been nominated in this council, I am not going to be sitting out there and throwing people out of journalism. No, sir. Please have a little bit of respect for my journalism. I mean, I can't understand. I have worked with you. I have seen you work and learned from you. Don't say this that, my journalism is so bad that I should resign from this council just because you say so.
Well,
okay,
Mr. Ram, go ahead.
I have a lot of regard for ANI. We've known them very well, used them a lot in my days and in my uncle Mr. Kasturi's days. And the idea was not to point any finger at anybody's journalism. The idea was to say, as an independent journalist, you have, if I were you, I would have no place in it. I wouldn't sit here because the whole idea was to entrust this to the Press Council, and this is the committee. You should put up a fight, and I'm glad you spoke out against it. So it's nothing to do with you, but I said generally. Since this has been reconstituted in a radical and drastic way, something very fishy is going on, you shouldn't be part of it. That's my view. You're welcome to disagree.
Well, let me get
okay, Nidhi, may I come in?
Okay.
Sir, if I was to just say this, that you have seen what happened in 1988. You have seen what happened in emergency. You and Mr. Shourie have been part of both those movements where you objected to Mr. Rajiv Gandhi and Mrs. Indira Gandhi. It took almost 15 days for Mr. Rajiv Gandhi to roll back. If you remember, sir, at that time ministers used to come and the press used to stand up and say, do you support Mr. Rajiv Gandhi in this? And when the minister wouldn't answer, then the entire press corps would get up and walk out. Whereas this government, sir, within 6 hours has revoked that. Whether it was a drama, whether it was staged, you know, we are second guessing as to what happened, whether Mr. Modi didn't know about it, did know about it, took back. You know, let's just think back that within 6 hours, Ms. Smriti Irani, or within 12 hours, Ms. Smriti Irani took back this and said we have to rethink about this. If they decide again to bring some kind of draconian measures, then we are journalists. We are obviously not going to accept it, sir.
Okay, Smita,
we have a history in this country of free press.
Okay, and because we have that history, Jyoti, and as Arun Shourie was rightly pointing out, and Ram was saying that as well, every time there has been an attempt to muzzle the press has pushed back, and it did so yesterday as well. What is your take on the events of the last 24 hours, and what lies ahead for us?
Well, 2 or 3 points, Nidhi. The first is that the Indian Express, the paper where I write, was the one that broke the story this morning. It was my colleague Krishan Kaushik who went to Bluecraft, this company, and they have
found that link with the Exam Warriors book.
That's right. Which the Exam Warriors, you know, that the Prime Minister has sort of, there's been a lot of quotes by the Prime Minister himself. So that's the first. The second is that I do agree with Smita that yes, the Prime Minister came in very strongly and told Smriti Irani that she must roll this back, because I think the Prime Minister realized that that in a country like ours, which is the world's largest democracy, and how would it look if in the world's largest democracy the press itself is being muzzled or being told what to do. And yes, there was this pushback from all of us. But I would also like to say something, is that we were talking about fake news. Now, Smriti Irani, and she is the Information and Broadcasting Minister, has herself tweeted in support of this web portal called truepicture.in, which is the one that put out 3 or 4 stories, 2 of them which the Indian Express ran. And these stories are completely correct. Now, how is
They're backed with documentation.
They're backed with documentation. That, yeah. One of them is about Foreign Secretary Vijay Gokhale writing to the Cabinet Secretary and saying that the Dalai Lama, that that ministers and officials should sort of not meet him in Delhi at least. Now, that story is backed with documentation, but this website put this story out as fake news. Now, you tell me, Nidhi, how does an Information and Broadcasting Minister, Smriti Irani, how does she tweet in support of that web portal? Now, my question to you is that, of course, Smita...
Her and 12 other ministers.
And 12 other ministers, Piyush Goyal, and several other senior leaders of this government. So, I think that's really shocking. So, here you have this government or Ms. Irani trying to sort of, issue this directive where you're trying to muzzle the press, if you like. And simultaneously, what you're saying is that you are, I think this is a really, really dangerous precedent, is that these are not just some websites. Of course, they may be, whoever they are. But why is it that government ministers are tweeting in support of it? And by the way, nobody has called into question that, nobody has said to Smriti Irani or to these other leaders that they should withdraw their tweets or delete their tweets or say that this is wrong, and this is patently wrong.
Well,
so I think, and I'm a little surprised that the Press Council of India, listen, nobody's bringing into, calling into account anybody's journalism credentials, not at all, Smita's or anyone else's. But I'd like to also ask the question, why is it that when the Editors Guild, which by the way put out a very strong statement today on this whole directive, why is it that the Editors Guild wanted to they wanted representation on the Press Council, and they were told that no, that's not possible because of some stupid rule that, and it's not, when I say it's not a stupid rule, because it was almost a deliberate sort of a denial of what the Editors Guild was trying to say. So here you have, and listen, it is up to the government to do what it wants to, if they want to have a press council, which is how they want to constitute it, it's up to them.
Firstly, when you said about the Prime Minister in the beginning, I'll take this to Vaibhav, who's been very patiently listening to everyone and taking notes. But You know, I for one don't understand, and I say this, that why this has to come through sources, that the Prime Minister is upset about this and wants the directive to be rolled back. I mean, this is a mass message that's sent out on WhatsApp to all of us. I mean, for God's sake, issue a statement, let the PMO issue a statement, let the PM come on record and say this is wrong and this should be withdrawn. This is not the first time it's happened. It happens like this repeatedly, and you know, that's another question. But Vaibhav, as a member of the BJP, and you've heard all the criticism here today, would you say that this was a spectacular self-goal by the INB minister? Would you admit that?
Too many seniors. It's very difficult to put my point across in the most intellectual perspective. If it was a political debate, I would have been very upfront in saying something like this. But this is journalists, and these are the same people. You have to be
polite.
No, I just
yes,
not.
That's okay. Be careful.
No,
so I just not need to be polite, but I also need to choose my words very carefully because you guys are the intellectuals. So
no, we're not.
You guys
we're just journalists.
do
it's
more reading than at least I do. So you know, a couple of things, and I completely have faith in Mr. Ram's viewpoint. Incidentally, he and I have common friends, but. Yes, and they're very strong views, and from where he comes from, I think I can agree to what he's saying. However, I think the Information and Broadcasting Minister, in all righteousness, she was just trying to speed up the INB ministry of the last 65 years, sitting there with no overhauling done, and I think trying to speed up the ministry to the digital age that we are sitting in today. Today, if I was to tweet a fake news saying I am dead, and this is my last tweet, it will spread. I have 60,000 followers on my Twitter. It will spread, but it's fake news. How to check it? The law perhaps needs more teeth. And the very first, because we feel in our party, especially, that journalists are not a community. Journalists are part of the family. And since we feel that ways, we also just wanted to get their buy-in and wanted to understand perhaps that, you know, yes, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get up to speed. We're trying to just create a self-reliance in the system.
I don't think anyone disagrees that that fake news is a problem. It is a problem. The question is the methodology that is used to deal with it. And it's also ironic when BJP MPs have defended, for instance, postcard news, which was actually peddling, trying to create a wedge between communities. And we may agree or disagree on the arrest part of it right now, but the fact is that is a supreme irony there, no?
No, so I would draw a line between defending the postcard news part of it or defending the arrest. I would draw a line.
Is it okay to peddle the kind of news postcard news was doing?
So two parts. It's absolutely not okay to peddle what any portal was to do today, because it's so damn easy. 3,000 rupees and you're up a website. You know, it's so damn easy to publish content today. But authenticity of the content needs to be understood and looked at in a larger perspective. So what our MPs, our ministers talked of was not exactly postcard news. You have to create a thin line. But what they wanted to say was clearly saying that the way the Karnataka government has made it an issue, because postcard news was trying to bring out certain facts against the current sitting government there, and I know Mahesh Hegde, and you know, it's very unfortunate the way they've gone about it.
But they want facts,
and that is
it's a website that's known to lie.
But the Karnataka government also has to be blamed for it. You just can't blame the ruling party, because you know, we have an obligation towards a larger audience.
To what? To tell lies?
No, we have an obligation towards the larger audience of the India. So we have to
lie to all of India.
No, not at all.
Because postcard news lies.
Not at all.
It lies.
You know, I would not endorse. I would not endorse. I would not defend. You know, I would not say.
But you are defending.
I am only talking about the way the Karnataka government has gone about arresting someone from the media. And for that matter, I know for sure that postcard news was just a website. He's not even an accredited journalist.
Just a website. You know, the potential for damage by a website.
That's exactly what I'm bringing about. And that's exactly what we saw.
Accreditation business. One second.
That's exactly what we saw, the country burning between 10 and 6 yesterday. And how did that happen? How was any party was to communicate with the guys who were trying to protest yesterday,
No,
you know,
I'm
with
not
an
getting
incomplete
I'm
issue.
not getting the Dalit protests into it, but I
So,
think we
no,
have a
I'm not
problem
getting
here.
the protests
We have to
into
deal
it.
with fake news.
But it is
the way
absolutely-
Smriti Irani wanted to do it, didn't cut ice. Smita, I just want to go across to R. Jagannathan, the editorial director of Swarajya magazine. We've been trying to get him, and we do have him on Skype now. And he goes by the name Jaggi on Twitter, so I'm going to take the liberty of calling him Jaggi this evening as well. But Jaggi, what's your take on the events of the last 24 hours? I mean, in your view, was this a huge misfire by the INB minister? Do you think that we have more sort of regulations, quote unquote, coming our way? How do you see this?
See, the government has absolutely no business to get into the business of regulating anything, especially media, because I think once you get into that kind of activity, you're going to get into sooner or later having to decide which is right news and which is wrong news, which is fake news, which is genuine news, which is something that needs to be done. The only thing I would say is that the move flags a reason for creating a strong self-regulatory body, both in print, television, and of course in the online side. Online is far more difficult to regulate, but I think we need something stronger than what is currently there, and I wish the media would do it, because that's not what they're doing right now, because we have a very friendly, chummy, you scratch my back, I scratch your back kind of relationship within the regulatory bodies. I mean, when was the last time you really ostracized fellow journalists for doing something wrong?
Absolutely.
I mean, it has not happened. So that's something that needs to be done. So if the media can take care of this, then I think we should tell the government to buzz off. Huh?
I think that's a very good point. And in fact, Jency, I wanted to ask you about that the need to create a strong self-regulatory body. I think that part of the reason why something like this has happened is because the mainstream media has actually failed in self-regulation in so many ways. How do we strengthen it?
Yeah, so, you know, firstly, you know, if I keep aside the issue about whether Postcard should be even seen as a, you know, credible news website, because, you know, at Boom we have constantly called them a fake news website because they are not a news website at all. You know, as journalists, we should not be doing, you know, a greater disservice to ourselves by actually bringing Postcard up to the level where probably BJP ministers want it to be bought. So that's the first point. The secondly, you know, mainstream media, we've been, you know, saying this over the last 1 year. We've been telling mainstream media editors to actually look at why probably so many of their journalists, so many of their you know, desk stories that are written, online web stories that are written, are actually finding it difficult to figure out what is fake and what is true. And that's something that probably requires training, because on the desk level, at the speed at which you are putting out stories on the web, they clearly are not equipped to actually look at what is probably a hoax story, or what is, you know, which are the handles that you need to follow, which are the sites that you need to go and check their About Us section and see whether they are satire or whether they are a credible news website. So unless the mainstream media actually agrees that there is a problem, you cannot actually go about fighting this issue. In fact, I agree with Jaggi that the one good thing that should ideally come out of this entire episode, and that way I feel the government has probably done us a favor, is that finally that journalists and editors would come together and think about how they are going to fight this menace. You know, if you can actually come together at the Press Council or the Editors Guild and the NBA as well, and figure out how they will be able to ostracize, using Jaggi's term itself, ostracize fellow journalists who are actually putting out fake news one after the other, and you know, not getting censored for it at all. That's something that, you know, editors need to think about, and rather, you know, probably going into this entire loop of about, you know, whether there's a gag order or not. You know, that's something that we need to seriously think about.
I think what you and Jaggi have said is actually are something, at least something constructive to take forward from here. Smita, you had a point to make. I'll take last comments from everyone.
Yes, Nidhi. Yeah, Nidhi, what I wanted to say was that, you know, many people who are not on social media, and through NDTV I want to tell them that there are many of you people who might be wondering as to why accreditation is important and why we are also worked up if accreditation is cancelled. You see, accreditation is necessary when you do beat journalism. When you go and cover a particular ministry, you cannot enter inside. That doesn't mean you can't do journalism outside of accreditation. Of course you can do journalism, but this is the meat, this is the core that is needed when you sit to do journalism. You need to find out what are the policies of the government, what have they done, what have they not done. Two, when you go to conflict areas, right now I'm in Srinagar, you cannot move anywhere in Srinagar, or you cannot go to conflict zones without an accreditation, without that accreditation, which is like an ID, which we take to the army and say, I'm an accredited journalist, which means that the government of India recognizes that I am a journalist and I work for a newspaper and I have 5 years of experience. That is why for people who work in Naxal areas, those who work in border areas, those who worked in conflict zones, those who go and report in ministries like Defense, Home Ministry, we cannot, anybody and everybody cannot enter those areas. We need to have that, and without us giving that information to newspapers and television journalists,
I think Jyoti had a quick question for you though. Jyoti had a quick question for you.
No, I'm just wondering why, Smita, you're bringing in the accreditation issue. We all know why accreditation is necessary and it's important. I think she meant it for the viewers.
No, we don't know, Jyoti, because there are people who
are
asking this.
No, that's fine. I'm just wondering, what does accreditation have to do with the fake news story that we're discussing tonight? We're discussing the fact that there was a directive that Smriti Irani tried to impose on the media. She tried to gag the media. Now, we don't know why and how she, I mean, we know how she did it or tried to do it. We don't know why she did it. So that's the subject under discussion. We're also talking about
there are many people, Jyoti, who said, there are many people, Jyoti, who said, why does it matter? So what if 6 months or 1 year, if your accreditation goes, how does it matter?
It does matter.
Why it matters?
And I think more than that, it's not the accreditation so much as the messaging. I think ultimately it's really about the messaging. You know, I'm afraid I'm out of time. I could go on for another hour. I'm completely out of time, Vaibhav. I'd like to thank all of you for coming in today. This is an important subject. Hopefully the media will take some lessons from this. I think as Jaggi also said and others have said, that we need to look at how we can strengthen our self-regulation mechanisms, because at the end of the day, you do not want government interference in the media. You do not want government regulation of the media, because remember, the government only wants you to hear what it wants you to hear. And therefore, it's important for us to find a way to regulate ourselves. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us. We'll see you again tomorrow night. Good night.